So as we were saying, next up is Johan Vikman, our NSO technical leader, and he will talk about troubleshooting NACM.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Johan. I work with Cisco NSO, and I worked with ConfD for a bunch of years before that. Me and my team were responsible for NACM, and I've had this talk before a couple of years ago, but we lost that presentation, so now I have to do it again, and it's a bit updated. Yeah, so troubleshooting NACM in Cisco NSO. A fair shark warning first. There's going to be some examples using XML, so I hope you're okay with that. I've also been editing this presentation up until the last minute, and I think I removed all the to-dos, but there might be one or two left. So, most presentations seems to have a quote in the presentation, so I don't want to miss out on that. So you'll get a quote from myself, something that I keep asking myself, why doesn't my rule work? And even when I did this presentation and looked through the examples that I wanted to use, I asked myself this question a couple of times. I also get this question from colleagues and customers sometimes. So I hope this presentation will help out with troubleshooting NACM. So I'm going to talk about, we'll start with NACM in netconf, what its role is, and then I'll move over to some augments and extra features that we have in NSO. And when I've done that, we can move over to talking about how to troubleshoot NACM as well. So, yes, NACM in netconf. We have Yang on our devices. We have a model-driven programmatic interface, and we use netconf to talk to that. So that was, netconf came with this intent, but these are the items. It's an XML-based RPC. We send RPCs from client to server. And usually Cisco NSO is the client and devices are servers. Or we can have another controller in between. It's transactional, so we do all or nothing, basically. Either everything is applied or everything is removed. And it can look something like this. We use SSH to set up the connection, talk with each other about the capabilities, and then we start to send operations, get config, get a response, we send an edit config to change or update something. And you can add more operations as well through modeling. But we haven't talked about authorization yet. So netconf comes without authorization. There was no access control model from the start. That was added later. So everything was unrestricted and all changes went through. You could do whatever you wanted. So let's dive in a bit. Look at the typical RPC and edit config here. So that's the protocol operation. We do an edit config, target running data store. And we have the data here. We could be creating this interface or just updating the MTU or something. So that's two parts, the protocol operation and the data changes. So yeah, let's talk about the authorization here. So NACM allows you to restrict what operations you can do. It allows you to, and that was that one, the edit config. And you can also restrict the content, this part. And when you're troubleshooting NACM, it's important to remember that. You can also restrict notifications. And that's really basic stuff. The RFC 8341, It's really easy to read, so I recommend that. There's also support for REST-conf call. I'm just talking about netconf here, but there's support for REST-conf as well. And when you do an installation, we have the model, the NACM model in the release. So relative to your install deal, you'll have this model, so you can go look at it if you want to. Yeah, it's role-based authorization. So the groups are our roles in this scenario. Every user should have a group, and then the user is permitted or denied to do actions depending on the group membership. And this is a basic group. This one is from the NACM RFC. We create a limited group, and we have two users, Wilma and Bam Bam. And when we have the groups, we can create collections of rules, rule lists. And in the rule list, we define the rules that permit or deny either a protocol operations like an edit config or an actual change in the config. They're ordered by user. The orders, of course, very, very important. We look at them from top to bottom. And the protocol operations rules you can apply on different operations then, edit, get, copy config. Here we have, we restrict the protocol operations here. Again, we apply it on the limited ACL group or the limited group. The rule list is named limited ACL. And here we have our first rule in this rule list. And I recommend thinking about your naming when you do this. When you add a lot of rules, you want to be able to find them somewhere, some good way. So think about the naming here. This rule only applies for the IETF netconf module, so it's restricted. And we're using the model name and not the prefix. So that's, you have the top of the model here, module name at the top, and prefix a bit further down. We want to restrict a protocol operation, and the RPC is edit config. Execute, and we want to deny it. And then we go into the data node rules. Again, it's under the same rule list. So we're mixing, in this rule list, we're mixing both protocol operations and data node access. This is a permit rules, we named it permit. You have the path, and note that I've added a namespace here. That's something that I messed up on a couple of times, and it can be kind of tricky to figure out at times. And to get this path, you can use, if you look at Martin's CLI tips from yesterday, then he shows you how you can get the path in an expert format. That really helps. And here we permit 4 access operations: read, create, update, and delete. So what happens if you don't have a match? First, we can add some statements to the model, actually. By default, denying everything or denying write or read. And we use that or we don't use that, but it's in the NACM RFC at the top. So by default, everything under NACM is denied. And this is something that you can use in your own modules as well. But if you don't have that, there are some defaults that you can configure. And if you're only using the IETF RFC, then the read default is permit, the write is deny, and exec is permit. And then you can change those, of course. Yeah. Okay. In NSO, we have a couple of augments. We add the ability to restrict command rules, and that's commands that are performed via CLI or web UI. And we also introduce context. And here I think we have CLI, web UI, netconf, or restconf. Yeah, let's take a look at this one. This is a command rule example. So we deny a get rollback here. And when we use the command rule, then we're in the tailf augmentations. So we set that namespace here. The name, deny get rollback. And the command that we want to deny is the JSON RPC get rollback. And here you see the context as well. Access operations, read and exec, and we deny that. And this is another one of those gotchas that to be able to be allowed to use an RPC or an action, tailf action or something, then you need both read and exec. So you need to be able to read up until and including the action, and then you need to have exec on the action as well. That's good to remember. Command rule for the CLI. The command is rollback, context is CLI. Read and exec, because it's an action and we deny it. Yeah, device group authorization. So you can create device groups with a bunch of devices. This is a new feature from 6.1. Not the device groups, that's all, but that you can write NACM rules on them. So, and a typical scenario is that you have a region where you have a bunch of devices, and then you have some admins that are allowed to operate on that region, but nothing else. So then you collect those devices in your device group. You can have devices, or you can have other device groups listed there. And then you create your NACM rules. Start with a rule list. So here we have a group called US East admins. They are permitted. And instead of having the RPC or the data node rule here, we have device group. So this is the new thing that came in NSO 6.1, which is kind of old now, but still. And then we refer to device group that we created earlier. And we wanted to allow them to do reads here. Or the augments, they are also available in a model, and that model is also available in the installation. So relative to your installation, you have this. And that's the same directory that we found the other model in. Yeah. We also have defaults for these command rules. Read default is permit, and execute default is permit. Yeah, so a local installation. When you do a local installation, which you typically do when you doing development, then you get some help. You get a AAA init file in there, which is meant for development, only for development. So let's see. And I tried to copy paste that, but it was too big. So this is the AAA init. So we set up, you get a bunch of users. an admin user with a password, admin. Don't use this for anything else than development. An OP user, a public user, private. Then we have some iOS setups. And then we have the kind of same defaults. You see that we changed the write default to permit, so you can actually do stuff out of the box when you're developing. We add some groups, and we add some rules. The admin group, they're allowed to do anything. But all of the other groups, they can mostly change the authentication stuff. The path here, let's see if I can. Here, this one. So the path is an X path, but the only variable that we can use in NACM is the user variable. And this is the typical way that we use it. That we allow the user to change his own stuff there under user. Yeah. And he is allowed to do it in the web UI as well. Okay. Back here. So that was the local installation. There's also some more items in the NSO augmentation, but I invite you to check out the documentation in the user guide for that. So back to the question I had. Why doesn't my rule work, and what can we do about it? I've seen this question a couple of times on the NSO Developer Hub, and I also get it from Gyro tickets from colleagues, and I ask myself the same question. So in the 6.3 release, we add another section in the admin guide about troubleshooting NACM. And there are 4 items here: logs, session, minding your groups, beware of namespaces and side effects. And NACM was designed to be easy to turn on, off, or on. So if you have a problem, check this first. Make sure it's on. It is set to true by default, but for some reason you turn it off, then you can stumble on that. The first troubleshooting tip that we have, or I have, is to enable the logs and set them to trace level. This is where you do it, doing the NCS config. And this is an example here. So a user is in the CLI and trying to enter the config mode, but is not allowed. You see a syntax error. And the only available options that the user has is exit or quit. But if we look in the developer log and we have it enabled and set to trace level, then we can see that actually we've set the command read default to deny. So we could open up this for this user. A netconf get config here. We see in the developer log that we have a default that is permit. And it says opera there. And opper in the brackets is the group. So this user is only part of one group. And if we have a deny rule, I restricted it again for this is for the netconf module. Get config and deny. Then we get an access denied tag, which is a bit nicer, and we see it in the developer log again. Reacted data access path. So what if we want to troubleshoot our permit rules? There's also some augmentations here for logging that you can use. I use it a lot. And that's if the rule has a permit action. Then you can add this log if permit. And again, you need to use the namespace here. Yeah, and we've seen examples of that already. So, and sessions, that's another part that you need to be mindful of, that when you start a session, you effectively start a process in the background, and that process has an authorization state attached to it. So throughout the lifetime of that process, you have that authorization state. So say that a user has started a CLI session and an admin comes in and changes the NACM. That won't affect the first user's state until he's kicked out and logs in again. And groups, and I have one more warning here, that the CLI command, the NCS CLI tool is changing a bit, maybe even in the next release or 6.5. So, but the behavior at this moment is this one at least. And this is a fairly common mistake because we also use this in the examples in the documentation. We tell you to start the NCS CLI by providing a user. But what happens in the background then is that the NCS CLI command uses the groups command, Unix groups command, to check what groups the user is a member of. And so if your user is not member of the admin group, then it won't work. Or at least if you have the a NACM group named admin then. So there was a problem when we got an example from a Linux box where the user was part of the admin group, and then we had a Mac where we weren't a part of the admin group. So then stuff didn't work. So yeah, please use the ID. Here we have started a CLI, and you can use the ID command to see what groups you're part of. And you can also supply the groups at the moment. That is changing in 6.4 or 6.5, I think. But I don't think we have anyone from the CLI team here, so yeah. But something like that, 6.4 or 6.5. And if you have many groups, you can add more, separate them by a comma. NCS loads, another tool, but it doesn't really work in the same way. Here you don't supply a user or a group. So if you don't, it will use the system user and the system group. Fourth troubleshooting tip, be mindful of your namespaces. In the paths, if you have some paths that are the same, then you need to separate them by using namespaces. Okay, here we have a poor pharmacist that is worrying about side effects. NACM handles side effects in a special way. So here we have a model with a when expression. So say that the user is not allowed to change the interface list here, but he is allowed to change the leaf. And if it deletes the set leaf here, then the interface list will disappear. It's actually a delete, really. But it's an implicit change, then a side effect, and that is always allowed. And that goes for when statements, choice statements, changes done by actions. So that's something to be aware of. Yeah, bonus tip here. Changes by services are also not checked for access, but you can enable it. But it doesn't work for non-post actions and some other items. Okay, so wrapping up. When you ask yourself, why doesn't my rule work? Use the logs. Mind the sessions. Be specific with your groups. Be specific with your namespaces. Beware of side effects, and perhaps enable NACM on services if you need that. Okay. Some time for questions. Do we have any questions?
Hello.
Hello.
You have told in the beginning of the presentation that you create the groups inside the NACM path, and then you have the rule list, and you assign the group, the users, or not the group to the rule list, and then you can have many rule lists, and the same group assigned to many rule lists.
Yep.
Each rule list is taken in a user order based. But how the different rule lists where one group is applied are processed? In which order?
Top to bottom. Yeah.
Top to bottom, depending on the when you have created the rule list.
So they should be ordered, and you can move them. You can move them in the way you want.
Yeah, but this usually leads to a problem when you need to modify one rule inside one rule list, and there are many users applied, and you don't want to change the rest of the order. You need to remove all the rule lists that can be affected, and recreate it again. And I have in my development, I have rules with more than 50 rules each.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy thing to do.
Oh,
so is there any way to simplify the things?
Not really. I'm afraid not. No. It grows.
New future request.
Yeah. It becomes troublesome to manage when you have a lot of rules. And be careful with your changes. Is what I can say. But you know that already. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, talking about the users. If the user is a member of maybe several groups, is that possible?
Yeah. You can be a member of.
Would that be
groups.
kind of potentially some contradictions and a problem?
Which roles have precedency, most restricted?
They go in order. So I mean, if you're a member of several groups, but then you have the rule list in a specific order, it will always start from the first rule list that the user is a part of, so to speak. Yeah.
More questions? Okay.
Some links. Please join the Developer Hub if you haven't already. It's really great if you have any questions. You can look up old questions as well. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan.